So recently in our game, the player characters found themselves in an icy tomb, an icy, rusty tomb. Right, this place had an unnatural cold and metal constructions in the walls that were causing the mage some problems. And in addition, the metal gear that they had was starting to corrode due to the magic in the place. Now, they had known about some of this previously and had protected themselves against it with you know alchemical solutions or oiling up their gear or whatever to sort of try to combat the rust. They bought heavy clothing to combat the cold and so on. So they headed in, and they explored a bit and came to a place, and there was 11 of these icy, we call them puppets. They're effectively almost man-size humanoids, faceless, obviously automata of some sort, made of ice that could breathe cold or touch cold and do some damage there. And some of them actually made out of their icy appendages bladey type or stabby type weapons to then do a little bit more damage. But they weren't that sturdy. A couple hits would knock any one of them out. And so even at 11-6, because that was the odds, I thought this is going to be fine. Party should do okay. What happened though is that one of the characters immediately thought, when they saw 11-6, that they needed to run, and they ran further into the dungeon and opened a door in hopes of finding an egress to lead the party out and save everybody from this 11-6. But the problem was there were 6 more on the other side of the door, and not awakened until someone opened the door. The door opens. Now it's 17-6. And you have 2 characters up there trying to keep the door closed, 4 of them trying to hold the line against the 11 that were streaming in from the other side. The fight didn't go well at that point. The party wins. They clear the field. But the priestess suffers an injury. She's going to be injured for the rest of the adventure, and she almost bleeds out. And the mage actually is incapacitated and goes down, and he'll have to rest a bit before he's back to fighting shape. And so the party actually backs out of the dungeon, which is prudent. But then they decide, nah, you know what? We're good. We're going to back out. We're going to go back to camp and maybe even back to town and leave this one. And I thought that was interesting because that was pretty much the first time in the campaign. Now, not that they have not been injured, they've had setbacks, that whole thing. They've been separated. They've run the gambit of all that. This is the first time they have failed. This is the first time that they had a goal. They set out to the goal. They prepared for the goal. They met an obstacle, were repelled by that obstacle, and indeed abandoned the goal. And I was talking about this to a few folks on stream. And one of the guys on stream said, well, I just wouldn't have let them open the door then. You know, if you knew that you were going to add a third, half again enemies, and that might be too much for them, I would have just made the door jam. And I was like, wow, I never even thought of that. Like, that was interesting to me because immediately it's a different perspective, because I was like, I'd have never done that. I'm like, yep, open the door. Right? I'm cackling GM going, sure, are you sure you want to open that door? And player's like, yeah, sure, I want to open oh God, what's behind the door? That's sort of where I'm at, GMing. And this guy's like, no, I would have just kept it moving because now they backed out, and right, you want to keep them moving forward and having fun, and it's no fun to have that mess, to have that failure. And again, not to call anybody out or to say, oh, you're wrong or what. I mean, that's not the way I typically do things in a game. But I thought it was interesting, and it did bring up the question, what do we do with failure? Is failure fun? Is it to be avoided? Like, where does it sort of fit in terms of your game and your table? And so I think that's the question that sparked a whole bunch of thought and a whole bunch of sort of mulling over, and that's sort of why we're here. I don't know that I have any advice. I don't know that this comes to a conclusion. I just wanted to go over all of the sort of thinking, the points in my head that I was thinking about as I thought about that conversation. So I think, though, let's be clear, right? Let's be clear. When I say failure, I do not actually mean, oh, you failed a skill check, or you failed a roll, or you failed an attack, or even you had to run from a battle, right? Or you lost, or you had to retreat and rest and come back. So what I mean by failure is actually on a strategic narrative sense. You had a goal, you pursued the goal, you met an obstacle, you failed at overcoming the obstacle, and thus had to abandon your goal. So failing a skill check, that doesn't matter in the scheme of things, because you might, because different games have different ways to mitigate failure. Runebear has inspiration. Narrative games will tell you, well, just fail forward. So even though you failed to pick the lock, something else has happened, right? You are continuously pushing forward to the end of the narrative. Some games might allow retries. Some games might allow you to take a penalty to try again, or to automatically succeed. So I'm not talking about a tactical failure. I am talking about sort of a narrative failure. You have failed, the bad guys have won, they've got the widget, you had to back, in this case, the group had to back out of the dungeon, and indeed decided this wasn't the day to go back in there. So all that prep they did to go in there, and the night is gone, because they just decided, you know what, we're gonna have to do this later, or maybe we don't do this at all. And that's what I'm sort of talking about. I'm also not talking about a TPK, because though that is certainly failure, I think the fact that you killed everybody at that point causes sort of a weird narrative break. It's now a new game for all intents and purposes. It is, these characters are no longer here. They don't remember anything about it. These guys are dead, and you have new guys coming in, and so the narrative sort of resets. So I'm talking about the case where the characters are, most of them, still alive. The story continues, but they have to abandon their plans or their goal. And that's sort of what I'm talking about when it comes to failure. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about some aspects of failure. Can it be fun? Where does it fit sort of at our table and your table? So one thing that I thought about is that, different games, different tables, different adventures have different room for failure. Now, I'm not going to talk about games per se, because I think by definition, we're going to just ignore the aspect of the rules on failure, because every game has a different way for dealing with a failed roll or a failed encounter. And what I'm saying is that after every, so we're defining failure by, you've done all that, and still the bad guys have won, and you have to abandon your objective. Done, right? So we're taking the game out of it. And I think once you take the game out of it, the rules, there are still two things that sort of give me pause when I think about how much failure can I let into this game. Like how open is the throttle, and how impartial are my dice. And the first one is, I think, the adventures that you are running, the campaign that you are running. So to exemplify, take Isle of Dread, one of the old modules for the expert system. And the Isle of Dread is, you find a map to an island and you charter a ship, and there's all these places. You actually get a map. The map is just to the coast. So you know this much about the island, and your job is to head in there and go to all these different places and, tame this thing, meet the natives, and either fight them or not fight them. Explore the little dungeons that exist, and there's multiples of them. Deal with all the various encounters, and there's tons of random encounters, ranging from, oh my god, I think that's a dinosaur, to little one-hit die, two-hit die dudes, right? The adventures from levels 3 to 7. So, there's a wide variety of things you can do there, and you're supposed to level up throughout your time there. You're supposed to spend a lot of time on that island and level up 4 levels, or potentially. And so, an adventure like that, there's a lot of room for failure. You could go and, wander into a lair and go, wow, we cannot fight 3 saber-tooths. That's crazy talk. Get me out of here. But just down the road, you could be going and fighting, some snakes, right? Or I don't know. Let's pick one. Not even sure. Some natives, right? Oh, we're gonna go steal some stuff from those natives, and they have armor class 9 and 11 hit dice. Holy crap! No, I don't think that's true. I think it's 1. I think it's a misprint. So I think an open world game, a hex crawl, a simulated game with multiple things to do at any given time gives the players a lot of outs when something bad happens, and a clear set of potential. Well, not a clear set of directions, but a clear set of ways they can bounce back from failure. And especially in a game like D&D that's very level gated and level based, the fact of the matter is, they can go and meet an 11 hit die dinosaur and go, yeah, we're 3rd level, dude. We're probably good. Let's just get out of here. And so I think there's places for them to go and things for them to do. And so if you're running games like that, if that is sort of the way your campaign is structured, I think you're going to have a better time with just letting those dice hit the table and go, well, sorry, man. Maybe you shouldn't have fought that. Or maybe you should have got out of dodge, or hired 100 1-hit die natives, or hire a couple 11 hit die natives to go fight the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And contrast that to a lot of the later games, and this isn't old school versus new school gripe, so don't worry about it. But something like Strixhaven is very, for all the possibility, the actual encounter, sort of the narrative here is very linear. It's very much assuming that you are going to do, mission A and then mission B, and you will meet these people at these times and have these encounters. And you still have, it's literally for adventures, it's for levels 1 through 10. But it's not for levels 1 through 10 and you just let them out and they can do all of these things, and they might meet something level 10 and their job is to then back off and rethink their life choices. It has, these adventures are for level 1, and then you'll move on to this adventure for level 3 and this adventure for, right? You are moving through as the narrative goes. It's probably using milestone leveling, probably, in a lot of D&D 5th games that seems to be the way, right? And in a game like that, there's no time where the PCs are going to back out and go, wow, we just failed out of school. Maybe it's time to start that garage band we were thinking about. Like, there's no time that they're going to... There's not a lot of GM support if they want to leave the beaten path. There's not a lot of GM support for the narrative failed because they didn't get the widget to take to the professor to get the hint for the next adventure. What happens then? And more to the point, a lot of the remediation that is in there is, oh, well, just give them the widget, or make the professor show up, or they didn't need the widget, some other student brought the widget to the professor, right? A lot of the remediation is get them back on the railroad, get them back on the track. And I'm not disparaging that type of adventure. I've run a lot of vaguely linear games in the past also. But the fact of the matter is, it's way harder to, there's not a lot of room for failure, because what happens in Act 2 if they can't progress to Act 3? Your job is to get them to Act 3. So you're never very, very rarely will you say, yeah, we stopped Strixhaven and now we're going to do, the Castle Strahd or whatever, because we almost died over here, so we're going to move to this other book entirely. That's just not how these adventures are structured. So I do think that your table, the adventures that you're running at your table, sort of matter in terms of thinking about whether to keep that door jammed or not, so that mage can't screw the fight up, kind of thing, right? In Strixhaven, I think there is a lot more remediation to sort of keep you on that path. And on Isle of Dread, I think you just let the dice fall where they may and see what happens. But the other thing is, so the other aspect, and I do think this is an important one, is how are your players deal with failure? Like, what kind of personalities do they have at the table? Are they going to shut down if they're not successful? I do think one thing that you always have to consider and mitigate at the table, there are types of players that have the despair trait. When things go badly for them, they tend to shut down and despair, right? Thinking either, and this is any number of reasons. It could just be personality. It could be their past experiences in games, with or without you as a GM. But these folks are despairers. When something goes wrong, they go, "Oh, well, I suppose I can't do anything about this." And then they sort of shut down and wait for the GM to say, no, here's what you do. This is how you move on, or here's a new thing to do, right? They're waiting for you to sort of bail them out, because they probably assume that this wasn't the way they were supposed to go, kind of, right? So they don't look for options. They don't think about, what their next step is. They think, oh, well, I suppose we just weren't supposed to open that door, or maybe we're not supposed to be in this dungeon. We need to get out of Dodge, and they despair. And if you have a table full of those, then that's rough all of a sudden. If you have a table full of those folks and they're sitting back at camp, and now they just don't even know how to continue the game until you hand them a scenario that then they go, oh, maybe our GM wanted us to do that instead of going to that dungeon. Some of that has to do with, that's obvious. Some of it has to do with personality. Some of it has to do with your session zero, talking and telling people. I think I have a couple despairers at my table, but I think we have conditioned them for this game especially that this is just going to happen. Like, this is absolutely this is a thing. There's multiple things to do. Some things are going to go your way. Some things are not. Some things are meant to be tackled head on. Some things are not. Some things you're ready for today, and some things you're not. And I think we just had that discussion, and I think they know what the campaign is about. And I think that mitigates that. And I think that's sort of what you have to do with those folks if you want to run that type of game. But you should at least be wary and be aware. That's something that has hit me over the years as a GM, going, man, I didn't expect them to just be so, upset about that losing this fight or having this guy get injured, or, you know what I mean? Like, I never thought that would, you have to be prepared for that. You have to understand that your players are going to react to setbacks and failure differently, and sometimes you have to prep them for it. So, does your game have room for failure or not? What are you running, and who are you running with? It's probably an obvious answer, right? It's probably you're like, yeah, sure, of course, duh. Well, okay, all right, I'll take that. Anyway, let's get on to the next topic. So one thing, as I was going through some of this, is you're going to watch this and think that I plan failures, that I sit there in my games and go, well, they're going to fail here and they're going to fail here. And I don't, actually. I always plan for exactly the opposite. I assume the players succeed at most everything they do. Now, don't get me wrong. Some stuff I go, yeah, that encounter is going to be a mess. Or I don't know how they're going to get out of this. Or, yeah, like that kind of thing, right? But I assume that they will. And I'm always sort of rooting for the PCs as a rule. 100%. Having said that, I do think that, the failures, when they happen, when they're statistically likely, when they happen, when the difficulties are so high or when the enemies are so tough, you have to at least understand that failure could happen. And, and you should at least be ready to use that failure to keep the game going, to make the game exciting, to make the game interesting, to keep the players engaged, right? So I don't plan failure, but I do try to use it when it happens. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So talking about not planning failures, one thing I try to not do at all, ever. I mean, most of the time. None of this talk is ever absolute, by the way. But use failure as a cutscene. So, I mean, sort of what I mean, right? You go, oh man, well, what I really want is I want them to be captured, or I want the NPC to be taken or killed by the big bad guy, or I want the MacGuffin to be stolen. And the problem there isn't that you are killing the NPC or taking the MacGuffin or getting the PCs captured. It's that you are setting up a scenario and assuming the PCs are going to fail such that you push whatever the narrative is. And I actually think that planning a failure is almost always a bad idea because the PCs are going to try they don't know, they're not in on the joke. So they're going to try their hardest to fight you on it. And that's going to lead to all sorts of twisting in the wind on your part to make sure the failure happens. And it's going to ultimately feel very contrived. So, let's say you want the PCs to get captured. And so you want them to lose a combat. So you throw the bad guys at them, and there's a ton of bad guys, and the PCs are fighting their hearts out, and they sleep these ones over here and fireball these ones over there, and they're fighting and using all their resources, and a couple of PCs go down, and then one of the PCs pulls out a spell you didn't remember or think about, and teleports the group out of it. Or puts up a screen of smoke so that no one can see, opaque smoke, and drags his fellow out of there. Or whatever, right? Or they get some goofy lucky hit and kill the big bad guy in your cutscene failure. Again, you have to be super careful about doing this, and I would suggest generally not doing it. Because I always feel that if you want them captured, make it a cutscene. If it's a cutscene, make it a cutscene. Now, I know that that's not all. It would feel, it's awesome if it goes to plan and it all works and it feels totally natural. Then yes, you might have gotten something there, right? The PCs feel that they lost, and thus their beloved NPC died, and you now, right, have used that. Great. Now they're ready to go get the NPC back, or get their body and resurrect them, or kill the big bad in revenge, whatever, or chase the MacGuffin down. Right? That is great if it works, but I guarantee you that they're going to fight hard against you, and you're either going to have to cheat or fudge your dice rolls or do something cheesy which no one's going to love. There are times when if you want a cutscene, you just have to make it a cutscene. Don't make it 30 goblins and assume they'll be captured. Make it 300 goblins and go, you're captured, right? If you want to fight this, I will kill you. But let's suggest not, right? Or now again, there are things I probably wouldn't do as a cutscene, killing the beloved NPC, unless, like I said, unless you just have to get that done as part of your narrative. That feels a little bad too. And yeah, people are going to go, well, I'll never take the PC's agency away. And you go, okay, I get it, right? Sometimes in your game, you are doing a thing and the plot moves to the next point, right? In a narrative game or a linear game, this cutscene has to happen. They have to have the MacGuffin stolen and so on. In that case, I would actually suggest just having it stolen. Justify any way you want. Make up your new whatever goofy magic and it feels cheap. I guarantee you, if you try to play that out, you are going to be sitting there fudging dice and it's going to suck. And they're going to feel worse than if you just told them it happened or did it off camera. Heck, you can even say, I made some rolls off camera, or don't say anything at all. And just have whatever you need to make play out to get them into the jail cell, to get them chasing the MacGuffin, to get them going after the kidnapped NPC. I tend to try to not use actual in-game played out failure as a cutscene because more often than not it goes wrong. So, especially in a game like the one we were running, where the PCs had not failed before, really. They had never been set back to that degree. It's always been minor setbacks that they then overcame. I think failure can set the tone. And right, you can literally change sort of the tone of that game or that session when PCs realize, oh, this is serious. We don't always win. And again, I never planned for that kind of failure, but I do think when it happens and you can see people sort of take notice a little bit, I think that is a valid and useful sort of aspect of a failure in a game is, maybe we're being all jokey and not really paying attention to the big bad because he's never really challenged us. But now all of a sudden we find ourselves without our gear, stranded on an island, and he has sailing away with the MacGuffin. Now it's different all of a sudden, right? You've changed the tone of the game, and changed the nature of that bad guy from someone they don't care that much about to someone they do. In our case, this was somewhat random event in a weird way, and but I did think it did give them a little bit of the fear of those ancient places, right? They backed out. They realized, hey, we could continue and we'll be facing danger and we might not all make it out. And that caused them just to rethink that. We may need to come back with more folks, better characters, or better, right, level up kind of. And it did set the tone. So especially, like I said, I think, and maybe the first one is the one, you don't want continuous failure either, in my opinion. Like, I don't want to, like, the PC should generally be winning, I think, and moving the game forward and getting better and getting cooler stuff. I do think progression is typically the name of the game. But I do think there is pre-failure and post-failure sort of attitudes toward things. And pre-failure, I think sometimes people, they take all of the the challenges more lightly, and then post failure they go, oh, whoa, hold on, I'm actually concerned about this. Um, so that's just something to think about, right? Like that first delicious failure, does that change the game or not? And does that change it into a more serious game, or at least a heavier, more thoughtful game, maybe? So that's one place where I see that I see failure has this interesting aspect, this interesting ability to change the tone of the game. So definitely in something like the Isle of Dread, I think that failure acts as a gateway. It's a level check. It's a are you powerful enough to do this thing check. Um, the encounters in there vary wildly, and a lot of hex crawls are going to do this, right? A lot of hex crawls aren't scaled, or there might be NPCs at certain locations which simply outclass the players. And I think failure in that case, you try to go up against the Megasaurus Rex or whatever the hell they call it, Megatherium, but you simply don't have the firepower to do so. And that is going to cause you, hopefully, to back off, lick your wounds, rethink what you're doing. And that part of the valley or that part of the jungle where that thing lives might be off limits for a few sessions until you can muster up enough firepower to then go back in. That's a perfectly good way to go about things. And again, I like that aspect. You need something in a hex crawl. Can't always be part of exploring is learning not only what you can get to, but what you can't yet get to, right? Some of the joy in a campaign where you're exploring is not getting everywhere. It's not getting everywhere. It is, oh, well, it's nice that we can go down here in the valley, but boy, those mountains, those are treacherous. I don't know what we're going to do up there. That stuff is badass. The navigation checks are terrible, and we're in a mess here. We can't get there. But boy, I can't wait till we can get there. Right? So I think using failure as a warning and as a gateway then has some very good effects on a game, because you can see what you can get to, but you can't get there. Right? And boy, but in 5 sessions, like, we're going to be able to get there. Or once we make this deal with these natives, they'll show us a way around. Or right, all of that. Any number of things where you try a thing and fail, and it's right there. It's tempting you for later, but now you have to find a different path. And we'll put a pin in that one and come back. I hope they go back to that ice tomb. There was cool stuff in there, but it's not for right now. And definitely there is the case of, in a lot of games, just that warning, right? Oh yeah, you can't. Your third level, you cannot fight this 11 hit dice thing. It will kill you. So maybe you did kill one of you, and so I think it's to avoid the TPK. So you don't want them necessarily to press on. You're actually hoping that first battle where the dude kills one guy or eats all the henchmen, right? Or they don't do any damage to it because they lack whatever, the +1 sword or whatever they need to actually do damage to this thing, that they then go, okay, that was obviously a DPS check or a level check or a, let's back off. We'll come back when we're better prepared for this. And I think that's valid. I think that's a good place to use that. You do not necessarily want, if you're literally going to lay out level 10 crap and level 3 crap and level 1 crap on the same map, you need to start giving them ways to know where to go and where to not go, or else it's just a crapshoot as to what they encounter next. And every encounter, oh, I'm sorry, you met the level 13 evil wizard. He kills you and raises your bodies to use as eternal zombie workers. That's not cool. So maybe some gateway encounters there that then force them back saves them from that zone, kind of. Now they can always risk it. So you're not closing off your open world doing that. You were simply warning them. They could still go. They could still press on. And if they do press on and get lucky enough and manage to get to the dungeon and maybe steal a treasure chest out of there or win the one fight they can, or whatever, and get the thing, oh my God, this is gear we should not have gotten until a little later. How exciting is that? So I think it's very valid to sort of put that danger in the way and to warn people off of your tougher areas in your sandbox. And then leave them with that information and let them do as they will. If you want your PCs to hate a bad guy, make the bad guy actually kick their ass once or twice or take something from them directly. That will do much. Like, you can describe how bad a bad guy is all day, but until they've interacted personally, and I think, keep in mind, I think a lot of games, my own included, have this problem where the big bad guy is this abstract thing they can't possibly fight until they can, and then they meet it for the first time, but then they're on par, right? And so the fight itself is just another fight in a long chain of fights that really doesn't have a great deal of meaning. And that's unfortunate, and that is sort of, I think, a flaw in how we run some of those games. I think a better bad guy would have interacted with the players multiple times throughout the course of the game and come out on top or escaped every time. And that's going to make that guy way more personal. If this dude has taken their gear, killed their buddy, or taken their buddy or turned their buddy against them, if he has literally shown up to thwart their plans, then I think that is a huge motivator. And you have to do this carefully, and you have to be very, right? This is a little bit of I'm not saying these are planned failures again, and you should be super careful because depending on the game, that big bad guy might not make it. D&D can be rough for singular bad guys against a host of foes. Runebearer is very tough against a singular bad guy against a host of foes. And worse, one of the damn PCs might do 1 point of damage, but roll a wound in such a way that guy is KO'd or out or killed instantly, one hit. And there's not a high chance, but there is a chance. And you have to be careful, so you should never plan a failure. But man, if you can make it so that bad guy has personally screwed them way back a month ago or 2 months ago or something, they will hate that bad guy. And when they actually get to engineer his demise, they will feel that way more impactfully than the abstract Dark Lord, which they've never seen, but now they have the magical light sword to stab him with, which, again, I've done many times, and it's great, but that bad guy was never really a bad guy. He's just the end boss. And I think what this has taught me is that there's a difference between the end boss and the big bad guy. And the big bad guy has dinked with the players and made them fail. And so the question there is, how do you do that without planning? I mean, that's going to largely depend. You just got to be careful with your bad guy. Give him the means to survive the encounter and the means to do what he needs to do. and again, I would and you might just want to hold up and make a cutscene out of it. Like I said, that would also be okay. Heck, so even beyond that, if the bad guy is leveling up with them somehow, even better. Like if he's, oh, he's only this local lord who's dinked with you, but then later in the campaign, as he dinks with you and causes you more problems, then he becomes the baron and now king. Ah, even better. If he's been their enemy and he's tweaked them multiple times, that's the way to go. So something to consider is, you know, can you put the bad guy in harm's way and have him cause the players to fail? They will feel that acutely and burn, and then want to go after that guy later on. So I realize this has been a little rambly. I haven't given a lot of advice. The one piece of actual honest to goodness advice that I would give is be prepared for a failure state. Be prepared for the party to fail, to lose a fight, to to be beaten by the bad guys, or right. Be prepared. And what that preparation entails just has to do with the game you're running and the players you have, right? So based on the game you're running, right? If you're running Isle of Dread versus Strixhaven, so let's say you're running a Strixhaven, a linear game. Let's say you're running a very linear adventure. And the answer is make sure you have an out. Make sure you have the Deus Ex Machina. Make sure you have the assistance they need at the right time to get them back on track. Because that's your goal. Your goal is to move them from plot point A to plot point B to plot point C. And if they fail between B and C, make sure something is there to get them back on the road to C. That could be NPCs helping them. That could be that could be a matter of contrivance and convenience. It could be a mysterious stranger, and then that might leave some questions, and you might have to explain or something interesting, right? But a professor could come and save them. The MacGuffin that they lost could show up in the mail, in the post, and they go, well, how the hell did it show up in the post? And that might lead to a fun thing, but have an out. Have some way that they can turn failure into success, or that success will, or even given their failure, they still get to move on to the plot point. Well, it looks like you failed your exams and burned down the alchemy lab. Good job, kids. However, a very wealthy patron of the school has insisted that I put you in next class or whatever, right? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And that's not actually part of Strixhaven, but don't quote me. But that's what I'm sort of saying. Have in your mind, okay, I can sort of work this if things go awry. Now, if you're running Isle of Dread, if you're running the open world game, then my take would be to make sure that you always keep players aware of all the things that they should be able to do. All the things you have for them to do, make sure they know of some of those things. When two of their number are killed by the dinosaur and they limp back to the village, the villagers can immediately go, oh, hey, oh, you met a dinosaur. Ooh, the great Maw. We leave him alone. We avoid him at all costs. The elders say if you stay still and hide in the bushes, he will pass you by because his sense of smell was dulled from a battle he had with the pteranodons many years ago. So just take that advice. And by the way, can you go fight these kobolds that have been jerking us around here for the past few months? We would really appreciate it, right? Give them a thing to do. Turn them from a failure to a success by just turning their attention. Let them know that they can come back to the thing. So with the Icy Tomb, right, the party gets beaten back by these 17 evil ice zombies or whatever. They get beaten back, and they're back in town. And they're telling their blacksmith, Baraki are big Viking cold dudes, effectively. they tell him about it, and he goes, "Oh yes, the map you showed me with the one with Baraki writings on it that I interpreted for you." He's like, "Ah, man, it's fascinating to me that my people were here, years and years ago. If you ever go back there, I would love if you would take me." And the reason I did that was to let them know that that place was still in play, that it was surmountable, and to give them sort of a reason to potentially go back, right? Like, oh, we could bring this guy and go back with him. Not that necessarily turns the tables, but it gives them a reason to get back there. Beyond just, hey, we've run out of other things to do, but remember that temple that kicked our ass like a couple months ago? Maybe we can get back there. Now there's an actual positive reason to go back. So I always, I think it's important to tell folks, hey, that place is still there. Remember it. And you could win if you approached it differently, leveled up, had more allies, whatever it is. Get back in there, champ, right? It's like the boxer in between rounds, and you give him the Vaseline and you rub his shoulders and then push him back out there. You squirt some water in his mouth and you're like, go get back in there, champ. But when they came back, there was immediately something else to do that they had to deal with. And they had a reminder about this place that they lost at to get back in there. And I hope that's enough. And I hope that sort of works. But I think you should just, as a GM, pay attention, always be prepped. Also, part of the be prepared would be to prepare the players. Again, this is session 0. Maybe it's obvious bullcrap, but it's that session 0 stuff where you tell people, look, in this game, it is going to be possible for you to fail. And I mean everything from you lose a battle to a player dies to a TPK to the bad guy getting away. Those are all in play. When that happens, that's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the game. We don't stop there and you stop being the heroes. The intent is that you will come back a later date and be the heroes, or do something else and be the heroes. Like, tell people that. And be explicit at the beginning of the game, or even after the failure happens, whatever you need to do. But make sure folks know that this is a possibility and it's in play. There you go. So it was interesting. It's an interesting talk. It's an interesting thought process. Is failure fun? As a GM, are you always on the hook to keep the game moving forward, or is it okay to have these major setbacks? What do you do when players fail? What is the biggest failure that you have presided over as a GM or taken part in as a player? Tell me what you think. This is all for discussion purposes. Thank you for listening to my rambling. I'll talk to you later.